Hey everyone, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100 subscribers. I honestly couldn't have done this without your love, support, and constant encouragement. Every like, comment, and subscribe means a lot to me. Now let's keep this journey going. Our next target is 200 subscribers, and I know we can do it together. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow as a family. Thank you once again. Luffy achieved everything. He found the One Piece. He reached Raftel. He became the Pirate King, and it destroyed him. When the strongest pirate in history suddenly wakes up years in the past, alive, surrounded by people who were once dead, it should feel like a miracle. But Luffy doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate. He's tired. Now his crew, the Whitebeards, and even the Marines can feel it. Something happened at the end of the Grand Line. Something that made the Pirate King wish he had never reached the top. This isn't a story about chasing the dream. It's about surviving what comes after you win. Disclaimer. This story do not belong to me. The author is Curse by Jennifer Wilson. Respect to author.
Chapter 18, Dreams. In Paradise, Crocodile's damned annoyed. He was planning on heading towards the New World, to make a name for himself as Whitebeard licked his wounds. After Marineford, he's bound to be weaker, isn't he? Perfect chance for another attempt at getting rid of the person who had squashed him like a tiny thing unworthy of coming to the surface. Crocodile isn't having any of that. He's going to build up his own powers first. Having his weakness found and exploited by the Straw Hat Boy is annoying, especially when that naive Marine captain who got the credit for defeating him with full knowledge of it. As if he could have ever been beaten by the hero of Logatown. Closing parenthesis. It was a tussle between his emotions towards Straw Hat. Hatred, because that brat had blown his plans to annihilation and back. He had planned, had plotted, had sewn his own version of the Hydra from myth in order to cement his control over the kingdom of Alabasta, and for Straw Hat, a boy barely into his spell as a pirate, to have destroyed it in a matter of weeks. Well, no more. Crocodile had learned from his mistakes. He's going to set the groundwork out, such that even as he was cut off, it was going to continue after him. But at the same time, he's startled, because no one should have a dream like that. No one should be able to tell him that he's going to be the Pirate King and believe every single word that the Straw Hat has spoken to him. No one should be able to break out of Impel Down, but he did it. Crocodile still couldn't understand the Straw Hat Boy. Why had he rescued a girl who tried to kill him? Why did he fight for a naive, insignificant little princess even as he was beaten again and again? No one should say that they could, when Crocodile had done the same, and had his dreams eradicated by the so-called benevolent Emperor of the New World. It didn't make sense. Being a Pirate King was worthless, when one couldn't back it up with power. Yet the Straw Hat couldn't, or wouldn't take that. Crocodile, were he feeling more kindly, could have appreciated that. But still, hadn't it blown up in Straw Hat's face? Crocodile stared at his existing right hand. It shouldn't be possible, especially as he tried again and again to replace it after it got cut off. He had strained himself to the point of exhaustion, as he bathed himself in the desert, willing for his hand to take shape, for his loss to be overcame. He had concentrated, focused, narrowed his eyes and kept trying to visualize the lost appendage. Sometimes, he had almost wished to give up. Then he thought back on how he had lost. Losing one would mean losing the use of that hand. And he was a Logia, right? He should have been able to avoid that. Why hadn't he? He knew that the answer was just barely within his grasp. Crocodile screamed and shouted in frustration as the limb refused to take shape. It didn't listen. His arm was still cut off at the wrist. There was no swirling of sand, nor gusts of wind. All that was left was missing, gone, never to return. Clenching his teeth, Crocodile bit down, and forced the hook onto his wrist. 3 months to stop scratching at the phantom limb. Months to get used to having a hook rather than fingers to grab. Years to learn how to fight capably with it. All lost within a night. But now, months after Marineford, months after the War of the Best, it reappeared, as if it hadn't left in the first place. Mr. One attributed it to an act of God. Crocodile was not ready to believe that. If God had existed, why didn't it aid him in the first place? If it existed, why hadn't Pluton landed in his hands? If it existed, why did the world give birth to Straw Hat and him in the same era? Open, close, open, close. The hands seemed to mock him, as though it was something that had existed all along, only that his efforts weren't enough initially. But he had tried. He had strained to will it into existence before forcing a replacement and learning to fight with it, and to use any means necessary to win, such that it no longer happened again. His own powers were becoming stranger and stranger. At one point of time, Mr. One had thanked him for forming a wall of sand when they were resting for the night. Crocodile had done no such thing, but the wall of sand had existed, as though it had appeared out of thin air. When a girl had pickpocketed them, he had sent a wave of ground secco but nothing had happened, only that a thin whip of sand had appeared, latched onto the girl's hand forcing it to drop the pouch that she had pinched off him. In anger, he had sent a barjan, but instead of dehydrating the girl, it had merely caused a ring of sand to surround him, preventing him from chasing after the panicked would-be thief. Rather than the offensive attacks that it was meant to be, something had gone wrong with the powers that were given by the devil fruit. It had become passive, for the lack of a better word. Then 2 nights ago, the alarm clock had rang, and Crocodile had shut it off. With his right hand, that shouldn't exist, he had chased off Mr. One with a few stern insults, before sitting down on a rock and examining his hand. "Why the hell am I stuck with you?" Crocodile startled, looking around for the female voice that had vibrated throughout the clearing that was their temporary campsite. No one was there. "It's not fair. I hate you so much." That voice was familiar. It was Miss Wednesday. Before Crocodile's very eyes, the wind whipped around him, causing his coat and hair to flap against him as dust swirled round and round him. Trees shuddered as they dried out. The insects in this clearing grew silent, as though it was fearful of what was to occur next. Then, as though it had already been there, a figure had appeared. Face of finely divided rock. Robes of constantly swirling, spinning particles of silt and gravel. A sparkling jewel of sapphire at her throat. Dust forming a long tail running down her shoulders. "Crocodile." The figure hissed, folding her arms. "I don't want you. And you, Miss Wednesday." Crocodile snidely answered. He knew that the princess was far, far away from here, in the kingdom of Alabasta, living the life of luxury that she had been born in, as though she had never been a bounty hunter, had never killed. Yet here she was, standing before him, making an angry face as she stomped her feet. "I knew there was a risk." She scoffed as she circled him, her eyes continually pinned to his face. "But who would have thought that I would be stuck with you, tyrant?" "Same here, princess. Mind telling me what's going on?" He poked the sand figure on the chest, eliciting a hiss of anger. "This doesn't make sense," she mouthed, tilting her head. "You're no pirate king." The old pain came back. "Damn girl. Oh, believe me, I know that." Crocodile snarled. "I know that very well. There is no need for you to say that, little girl." "Don't call me a girl, tyrant. You have no idea what is going on. And I would never, never make you a king. Far from it. I would weaken you, I would make sure that you never harmed a single being ever again. You did this." Crocodile roared, finally having an answer to the problems he had faced while using his powers. "What the hell are you doing? When I return to the new world, I need those powers. Powers that would let me have my just revenge." "Revenge on what, tyrant?" "Luffy. On Whitebeard. Who is responsible for your weakness but yourself?" Crocodile cringed, her words hitting the nail right on the head. "I would have it all. Those who dream should dream on. Because the world isn't kind, the world isn't fair." Crocodile let the anger, the frustration he had bottled up all those years have free rein over his words. "And no one should have the right to dream. Listen to your words." Miss Wednesday smirked. "Do you honestly believe yourself? Dreams are important, because you lost sight of yourself. Look at you. I pity you of all people." She gave a high, throaty laugh. "Do you think that can carry on? This entire era was started by a dream, a vision. And a king has to have a vision. If not, he becomes weak. He lets his past mistakes overshadow the future he envisions. And that's not how you can look after your own people. Or he becomes sensible. He learns from his mistakes. He would take over with strength. Strength isn't everything. Arg, that is why you can never be king. You have no idea of the future. You let things be. A king needs to look after his people. A king has to know what he's aiming for, and not the general destruction of the world. That doesn't make a king." "Bullshit," Crocodile flatly said. "What people? A king, in the end, is one that subjugates his people." Quote, "Of course not. Why are you so stubborn? A king, in the end, is reliant on the beliefs of his people. Of course there's room for cynicism, there's room for strength. But if you don't respond to the people, if you don't engage with others, there's a reason that only Mr. One is still loyal to you. What happened to the rest of your organization? You only have Mr. 1, 2, and 3 in the same prison. And even then, Mr. 2 and 3 left you. So I should sit back and let people walk over me." Crocodile shouted at the female figure. "So that I could be betrayed. Give them a reason not to betray." The female frowned. "Give them something that makes them stick by you. Mr. One values his relationship with you, that's why he's still here. A crew's loyalty is made of what you are to them. Without trust, without camaraderie, there's no way anyone would be willing to throw themselves for you. You need to learn that. Go away, Miss Wednesday." The figure rolled his eyes, and snapped its fingers. A second later, Crocodile watched as his right hand was reformed back to its original shape. "A token of what I can do. If you want to get back your powers again," the figure stuck out its tongue, "you have to learn what immutability really means. Otherwise, no hand, bastard. You little As Crocodile re-examined his hook, suddenly unused to the cold metal lining his wrist, the female figure of Miss Wednesday let out another bout of laughter and vanished into thin air. Damn, Crocodile tried to use his powers to reshape it back to his hand. Was he missing it? Couldn't be, but failed. He tried another time, visualizing his hand in place. Still no dice. Then Crocodile thought about sand. Sand is mutable. It can be transformed, reshaped, changed. It can be. Crocodile could have kicked himself in the chest. Not that he minded. It's not just sand he's looking at. He can create sandstorms that he can't control. He can freely desiccate other bodies with just a thought. In other words, it's not just sand he's got control of. Water, carbon, minerals such as potassium and calcium. Iron, found in hematite. In other words, if he's got control over water, over wind. He's got control over a lot of things related to sand. First, bones. He twitches, focusing on the calcium. Then, flesh, using proteins made of basic matter like nitrogen and hydrogen and oxygen. Links using hydrogen bonds, disulfide bonds, ionic salt bridges and skin. Nails even. Before his eyes, what was once hard, precious metal becomes muscular. Mutable. Dreams were mutable. Sand was changing. Dreams shift and change. Not one path is absolute to a single goal. You did it, Miss Wednesday pronounced in an astonished voice. You actually, how? Now then, Miss Wednesday.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
Crocodile felt a smirk creep over his features. Talk fast, starting with why you are currently standing here instead of Alabasta. He raises a finger as sand is whisked into the air, hoisted by the tiniest grains, forming a face. Fine, the words are reluctant, sulky even. Let's start with the current state of the world. Oi, old man. Cherry blossom petals floated in a swirl of wind. When are you dying, brat? A shadowy figure was behind him, but Edward Newgate could not turn his head. His entire body felt as though someone had replaced his bones with lead, and his muscles with jelly. Even his fingers were immobilized, unable to respond. They were in a familiar forest. Newgate half expected Roger to emerge from behind the tree, arms carrying an enormous sake bottle as well as 2 cups, roaring with laughter in his usual manner while Rayleigh tiredly yelled at him in exasperation while keeping an eye on red hair and that big-nosed boy, but the only one present was the shadowy voice. It felt familiar. I'm pretty damned old, you know. The voice made a sound akin to swallowing something. Like over 30. Not a brat, you know. Then who are you? Newgate muttered as he tried to inch his body away from the figure, but it didn't respond to his command at all. He knows that this isn't a dream, because even as weak as he had felt these past few days, his dreams hadn't changed to something remotely similar to this situation. It's a period of half wakeful, half imagination. He doesn't like it. I wonder why were you rescued? You're not that important. The voice behind him seemed to echo a smirk behind that tone of wry sarcasm. And it's Jacob, by the way. Who are you referring to then? Because Newgate hasn't been rescued by anyone for a very long time. There is only one person that qualifies. Well, my very, very dear rival, of course. He keeps changing his name though. The figure faces him, and Whitebeard could finally put a face to the voice he's been hearing all the while. A white long coat with epaulettes. A Marine's uniform. I'm not from the Marines, in case you're wondering. He ruefully fingers the neckerchief that he's wearing. But I do love dress up. The next few weeks are going to be busy, if you get what I mean. After all, he grins menacingly. Things are all going aflutter. Petals dance, flowing in between them. The mysterious figure gives a smirk, bowing out of his vision. And Newgate. Newgate is still here. He is stuck in the middle of nowhere, with no one to talk to, no sons to converse with. He has the company of cherry blossoms in a still pond, but that's it. Anyone there? He can't move, can't fidget, can't twitch, but his mind is clear. He's facing his worst fear. Why can't he move? Why can't anyone hear him? Anyone. His voice echoes, but echoing is not the same as actual conversation. Whitebeard is alone. Jacob smirks. Oh, he hadn't enjoyed trolling someone that much in a long, long time. Usually it was him being pissed off. Be it the antics of the Pirate King, or the various emperors that owed no allegiance to their supposed lord, he had been kept busy in his time in the future. Not to mention the nonsense he had to deal with. Oh Pirate King, why must you plague him so? Now that he had been alleviated of his duties, he's got plenty of time to kill. Hey, time. Something that's mutable, even when they hadn't expected it. Kill. He's been doing so much of that for these few years. Jacob wasn't a writer when he was younger. But his heart, as always, has been filled to the brim with the sea. It's almost amusing how his interests hasn't changed one bit from the time he had met the Pirate King, to now. Jacob is a writer of fiction. But he is also a planner. Jacob's fame spreads together with the books he has authored. But his authority was greater as the second in command of the self-defense force. Oh, of course he's not the leader. Who would want to impose such a heavy burden on themselves like that? Once was enough, thank you very much. So many prideful egos to deal with, as leaders who had made their way to the top via pure grit and overwhelming power were one to have. So many dreams he had to crush. It was so disappointing though. Mary's position as a guardian of Raftel would definitely make his job of crushing dreams easier if she had just agreed to work under him. But the bartender was so stubborn. And her employees as well. Two others who shouldn't have existed, shouldn't have even been on the game board to begin with, were with her. On the flip side, this meant that they and their respective allies were kept well out of the way for the next 2 years. On the board, but at home base, not able to move on until Mary can be moved. In other words, they're at a choke point. No pacifistas to worry about, because the project's been put on hold until Vegapunk could confirm that they are in no real danger of having true will. And the scientist wouldn't think so until Kuma's lost his own will. Which isn't happening because Mary was there. No, Surgeon of Death, to think about, because he doesn't know Straw Hat particularly well either, and vice versa. Butterflies shift a wing. Vibrations reverberate towards the air, as superfluous as that may sound. Whirlwinds are created on the other seas. Ripple effects are so interesting to study. If only if it didn't affect his plans so much. Shirahoshi's trying to make her own move. Jacob giggles as he flips a pawn on its head. Naughty, naughty. Who told you that bad girls could have nice things? Shirahoshi has to respect the fact that even as time is changeable, destiny isn't. There would be a crisis to solve on Fishman Island. Just not the one that Luffy was supposed to solve, that is. Shirahoshi may try her best to overcome the generations of distrust between fishmen and humans, but she will need Straw Hat. It is the only way for things to go back to day zero. Well, someone's got to patrol the D's after all. If his rival refuses to comply, then that's fine, because since when did Straw Hat listen to someone else? But Jacob's got to exert some control over the situation. He can't bear to let the pawns go amok. It destroys the grand strategy he's been building. If Straw Hat chooses to fight, he would fight back. Have you forgotten? This is the summary of our roles. You are to flee, I am to chase. There won't be an end until you die before I catch you, or I claim the credit for taking you in. Shishishishi. I understand that. That's the promise between us. I run, you chase. I get free, you get mad. Was it so long ago that they had been simply one marine running after another? Those carefree, well, not really. Days of being an executor of justice were over. He is still a practitioner, yes. But he is more vicious, because the pirates of this era are more tiresome to deal with. He doesn't know what justice is anymore. But what he knows is, things had spiraled out of his control in his time. He's not going to sit by and watch the world fall into chaos again. What is it? The king's cook is annoyed. The swordsman had simply shrugged and wandered off aimlessly, probably off to provoke another fight. He on the other hand, had followed a fruitless search in Marineford, as no one had been observed to hold the presence of a guardian. Someone else is checking up Sabayati, but he can tell that it's dire when he detects the presence of tonkatsu ramen on board the Moby Dick. Since his last visit, Thatch had been leery of preparing ramen in the assorted forms of stringy noodles, and the rest of the cooks prepare meals that aren't fit to be his vessel. The fact that a division commander's cooking something that has proven to be a joke among the Whitebeard pirates proves that something has gone wrong. It's an emergency. Thatch points towards the bed. Pops won't wake up. Beads of sweat dot his brow as the old man lies still, his hands bound by strong rope lined with linen. He's been clearly sedated, but his breathing is harsh, short. The beeping in the background hints at his agitated state, despite the heavy sedation that the king's cook could faintly smell. In other words, he's in a nightmare he can't wake up from. Knowing the medical expertise of the Whitebeard pirates secondhand, the king's cook smells foul play. He's no doctor, but he can tell from the anxious expressions on the lovely lady nurses and doctors that are flitting in and out of the infirmary that this isn't normal for Whitebeard at all. Okay. He searches the faces of the worried crew. The division commanders are clearly at the end of their tethers. This isn't my expertise. Do something. Some brat with a thick collar mutters as she paced back and forth in the already crowded infirmary. Quote. We have tried all available resources. The man with dreadlocks spits out painfully. Yet he won't wake up. This has to be something that you know, because nothing has changed since your last visit. The crossdresser, who the cook can tell would object strongly to being called an Okama, responds spitefully. The king's cook bites his chashu lip. It's not a medical issue, but because a cook knows the body of a person he's about to feed, he can tell that Whitebeard's physically alright. Mentally, however, he's not all there. If it weren't for the beeping noise, the king's cook would have told them that the man's mind is long gone. But the thing is, he's still alive. Then he whiffs. A smell of cherry blossoms. But underneath, there is something else. Cigar smoke. Damn it. Because he recognizes that smell. The king's cook had smelled it on Dawn Island, hidden beneath cherry blossoms, but it still scars his mind because that man was supposed to be reliable. I know who did this. It's the one who killed our captain. Chapter 19. Incoming collision. Chopper. The king's doctor stands up as Sanji appears back on board the ship. The damn fleet admiral is at it again. Chopper winces. The fleet admiral had been an ally to them. In fact, he and their captain had been on first name terms even. Though they fought at every meeting, it was a tradition, and not out of pure hatred. Hell, the captain had even gone to the fleet admiral for advice. But their friendship was long wiped out of existence when, instead of executing their captain in private, a simultaneous attack had been carried out on the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, killing hundreds of its members. So the crew had to go to war, because they were nakama, and they could not stand to see their allies fall. Whatever fond feelings between them had been destroyed irrevocably when Chopper had died on Dawn Island, yet Chopper still felt betrayal cross his heart when he heard how the fleet admiral had invaded and taken over the dreams of one of his captain's allies. Nightmares were something Chopper hated. And he hated the fact that someone had imposed their nightmares on another. How did they know that it has to do with us? Usopp, who had been toying with some of the systems on board the ship they were using, asked as he sat down at the table. This was left. The king's cook deposited something on the table. Chopper watched as Usopp examined the object. It was a piece of parchment, with the insignia of an anchor stamped on it. 20 were split, each to find a king. 3 powers split, don't know a thing. I seriously can't write poetry, you know. Go ask the crew of the Pirate King. Recognize the handwriting. It's got him all over the place. Sanji hissed. And I smelled that stupid cigar before, and it's on the Whitebeard ship. So it's really him, then. Chopper felt his heart sink, because he had still respected the fleet admiral. This was yet another nail in the coffin for the fleet admiral's reputation. Where had things gotten wrong? Chopper didn't know at all, but he felt that clearly something had provoked the fleet admiral into taking this course. Sanji, what's your take on this situation? Usopp says, frowning in thought. After Robin, who's currently investigating Baltigo, Sanji's the best at ferreting out information. From disguising himself at Little Garden, to sneaking on board the sea train, Sanji had been the ace in terms of sussing out information, even as he emphasized on his cooking credentials more. We found out from Moss Head that the so-called 20 Guardians are instructed to find their king. Rule 1. They aren't allowed to choose the same one, so 20 captains would make their way to Raftel. Rule 2. All are to remain in hiding, to prevent us, the self-defense force and the Revolutionary Army from finding them. Shirahoshi herself isn't being particularly secretive about the fact that they were instructed to hide, so that means the main threat has to come from the other 2 forces. In lieu of this, the fleet admiral of the self-defense force has to be the danger that the captain's worried about. Did you find out who posted that announcement? Robin. Because there is an ear on the door to the fridge, meaning their archaeologists just received their important message. With a flutter of flowers, a mouth sprouts on the same door. It was placed anonymously. Previously, it was supposed to be an advertisement for someone's book, but someone had changed the advertisement to that announcement in the printing room. Based on the evidence found, it seems that a publishing company set up by the Self-Defense Force would be responsible. The Self-Defense Force again, huh? Sanji rubs his chin in thought. That schism really created an enemy like nobody else. Robin, have you found the location of the fleet admiral? The mouth pursed, as the user appeared to concentrate in thought. Finally, the mouth opened again, and 2 words emerged from the mouth of the user. The cigarette in Sanji's mouth dropped out. I'm sorry for doing this. One figure shadowed in darkness spoke as he faced another, fingering his hat. No, you're not. The second figure crossed his arms. Newgate has been shouting himself hoarse for the past few days. Yet the scene continued to play on, and his words fell on deaf ears. I understand your actions, but I disagree with them. Must we come to this then? A third figure emerges from a shadow, lowering his hood. The first shrugs. Then as an affirmation of our agreement, here. The second tossed his gloves at him. It was given to me by your grandfather. Really? The first figure puts them on. Heavy. The second scoffs, turning his head away. Of course. It's seastone lined, and you're a devil fruit user. And you're not. The third says, offering his cloak to the second. Then, the first pressed onto him the hat he had been toying with. You're okay with this, Pirate King. Pirate King. Newgate strains his eyes, and found that the first figure had a familiar outline. So the first was Goku. And it was given in exchange for a hat. Shishishi, it's a good anchor of our agreement. That hat, look after it for me, would ya? Tossing a sloppy version of a salute, the first figure laid his arms around the other 2. They stayed like that for a while, each knowing that it may be the last time they saw each other. Right then, time to go. The darkness started to surround them, enveloping them in its grasp. It curled outwards, before swirling, with the 3 in the eye of the hurricane of shadows. With a rush of air, the 3 disappeared from view. Rum for 3. It was a busy day at Mary's bar. Customers were shouting, pub brawls about to start. Yeah, typical Friday night. Here's your rum, enjoy. R.O. hurriedly pasted a smile to his face. 30 bellies each. Oh, and why should I? One of the customers, North Blue Pirates, by the look of their clothing, pointed a gun at his head. R.O. freezes, staring at the empty wall while his mind is racing through unforgotten images. Bang, 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 snow's falling. Law is silent in the chest. R.O. feels the burn of gunshots in his chest, and added on to the further injuries that he received, it's enough to send him into the depths of unconsciousness, but he must not go to sleep, because then Law would be found out. He grits his teeth, willing for him to stay awake, just stay awake. Read the sign. Get out. In a rush, Mary's by his side, crossing her arms and glaring down the pirates. You won't get better rum at this price, mind you. With her sleeves rolled up, she picked the three of them by the scruff of their necks and tossed them right through the door. Those in her path quickly dodged the woman, and a group of Marines even shifted their entire table in response. Do you want to sit down for a while? Aro looks down, and his hands are trembling. No, I'll just wait for the shift to be over. 2 more hours. He can handle that. When the clock strikes 2 in the morning, the bar's almost clear, and it's with a sigh of relief that Mary flips the sign. Aro slumps down onto the bar, face lying flat against the wood. That was exhausting. Despite saying that, Mary still has her customer smile on her face, though it looks a lot less convincing than at the start of the shift. She tucks the chairs into the table before starting to wash up. Aro rises to help, but is shot a glare by Mary, who motions for him to sit down. What happened this time? She coaxes in a soothing voice. Shooting. Snow. He breathes out, lying his head onto his arms. Triggered by the pirates from North Blue. Ah, I'll make an example of them next time round. Mary shakes her head. I pasted a notice telling them that I'm an expert at breaking up quarrels before they start, but did they listen? No. She drags out the last word as the glass clinks against the sink. I just hate feeling so terrible each time I get a flashback. Aro sighs, ruffling his hair. He still couldn't take a gun to the face, 11 years after the shooting. Aro was supposed to protect his kid. Instead, Law had jumped right into the muddy depths of piracy. Aro felt a slight amount of awkward pride at the threat level that his kid had posed. That didn't stop him from bragging about it to the wholesaler, and the ice maker, and Kuma, who doubtless knew about the bounty of his kid already. Maybe he went a bit too far, but he was so goddamn proud of the boy who had escaped his brother with him. It's okay. You're doing better than those early years. Mary lays a hand on his back, rubbing it in circles. Aro sank back into his chair, and let out a moan at the reminder. Those were horrible, horrible years. Days when he simply did not feel like rising out of his bed, weeks spent in rehabilitation, relearning every movement, months of trying to acclimatize to loud noises and being on edge whenever someone had stepped too closely to his personal space. He was so useless. Sometimes Aro wondered why he was rescued in the first place. Law was able to move on from Flevance and from Minion Island, living as freely as he could. Luffy was as much as an asshole, judging by his success in taking over Dressrosa, which never failed to give him a pang of guilt, because that information that was supposed to reach the Marines never materialized, and it was all his fault. He was a former Marine, and he couldn't get back to where he came from. Double-crossing both organizations would do that to you, and right now his social circle's his kid, Mary, and Kuma. And the ice maker, who's a wily bastard who overcharges for his services but trustworthy. And Shaki, who's smirking even as she and Mary helped the wholesaler get rid of a persistent stalker. He had friends in the Marines before, but he's checked up on them through less than legal channels. Belmere dead due to pirates invading her hometown. Norrington's flagship didn't survive an encounter with a whirlpool and a sea king. Nelson died of a summer disease in a winter island. The list goes on, because the Marines haven't had much luck with members of the lower end of the power spectrum. He's been gone for years, and the turnover rate's high. There's a bubble closing down on him, and he finds it difficult to breathe. His chest is not moving, and the scars are so hot, and Law isn't there right behind him. He's in danger. Luffy, please brother, please. Hey, it's alright. She squeezes him loosely. People get injured. People get shell shock. It's normal. Breathe. Aro lets in 1, 2 choking gasps, not realizing he was hyperventilating until then. His palms are sweaty, and he absent-mindedly rubs them against his pants. Mary looks at him as she does all her customers. Steady, calmly. Prepare me a drink. She places a highball glass filled with ice in front of him. Aro closes his eyes. In it, he remembers the first time Mary prepares it in front of him. It had been a warm day, and Lot, who was still underage then, had wanted a drink, and had refused the common alternatives of coffee and iced tea. 2 parts orange juice. He carefully strained the juice into the mixer. 2 parts pineapple juice, 1 part lemon juice. He recalled Law making a face when he saw the lemon being squeezed out. Half part of grenadine. He shook the mixer, before straining it into the glass. He adds soda before garnishing it with a slice of orange. Cinderella, please enjoy. Mary takes the glass, staring at the evenly mixed drink before sipping it. 7 out of 10, she pronounces, and Aro allows a smirk to creep up his lips. The first time he did it, Law had grimaced and said that it sucked. Because it was non-alcoholic, Aro tested his skills with this particular drink the most often. It's no wonder he's an old hand at it. Most bartenders don't drink on duty, and Aro had to struggle to get out of the alcoholic trap. Temptations dancing before his eyes each day as he surveys the bar, but he keeps himself busy by pouring, rather than downing alcohol. He could never hold his head high if he ever regressed back to drowning his sorrows in liquor. Well done. Mary beams. Let's take a break, I'll wake you up at 9 tomorrow so that we can start preparing for Saturday. Mary stops, and tilts her head. Something's ringing. Without a word, she heads towards the backroom where the transponder snail is kept. Purupurupuru. Who contacts the bar at this time? RO, throw up a privacy shield. Mary picks up the receiver, and watches as the snail's expression changes. Please make your way to our base now, Mary. No way, no way. Mary lets out a hiss. I'm not your servant. You can't tell me what to do, Jacob. Are you certain about that? There are people whom the Marines might want to know about, you know. RO freezes. Because he knows that he'll be court-martialed for his actions on Minion Island, if not for Sengoku's unofficial protection. And Kuma is running the gauntlet each time he goes for a checkup with Vegapunk, because the world government is determined to succeed in creating a human weapon out of him. Mary doesn't keep in close contact with people outside of Sabayati. But those linked with her bar are her greatest weakness, because unlike her, they could be threatened directly. But Mary doesn't abandon them. She chooses to risk her safety and freedom for their own. So RO won't leave her alone as well. What does Jacob want? He signs, while Mary lets out a huff. He wants us to fight for him. But we will not. She turns back to the receiver. In 1.5 years' time, someone important shall start their journey into the new world, and I'm eager to send him off. If I do follow you, that means I would never be able to make it back in time. What if I were to say I have something important? Something that you treasure beyond belief? The snail gives off a smug expression that all the alarm bells are ringing in Ro's head. It's so similar to his brother's smile in normal times, a kind that brings shivers down your spine. RO doesn't like the look of this. Quote. What do you have? Fear weighs heavily on her brow as she sits down on the bar stool. A few really tall children, perhaps. Mary stands up, and her fist clenches around the receiver in frustration. What are you planning to do to them? They're innocent, she wails, and RO thinks back to when Jacob had last came into the bar, telling him another path to Raftel. Mary had protested as Jacob continued to wax poetic on how the world has changed and thus new methods have to be implemented. Jacob was firm in his belief that only by controlling the flow of people traveling could there be security. To Mary, this was unacceptable because this was curtailing freedom. This was taking away the liberty of others. And she refused to be a part of their cause, and rejected joining the self-defense force on many occasions.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
Looks like this was their payback. Oh, I'm not saying I am going to do anything. But there's quite a few children who are being poisoned, you know. And if they wait for, I don't know, a few more years, then there's no hope for them at all. There's a low laugh, and RO feels sickened, because this. Poisoning children. Blackmailing an honest woman like Mary with their lives. Mary's lips draw in a firm line. It's clear what decision she has to take, because Mary's kind soul would never risk the lives of innocents for principles. Meet you at our base then. The person on the other line sings before Mary slams the receiver back on the transponder snail. She starts waving her arms, pig. That insufferable blackmailing rum-soaken fool. And she whispers insults and exaggerations, vulgarity spilling past her lips in a sharp tone. Mary rarely loses her cool, but Ro's mind races to resolve the uncomfortable situation they have found themselves in. Say, Mary, where's self-defense force base? Mary pronounces 2 words with disgust, and RO startles, because it's just so perfect. I'll call my kid on this. He'll help after hearing about the poison. Because Law would be the first person to know what it's like, iron borders trapping you within the confines of a dying nation, and death at your doorstep, and his devil fruit would be bloody effective against the poison that Jacob hints in his proposal. Still, Law would definitely participate anyway, because Ro's been keeping tabs on Daffy, and if there's one way to call his attention, then let the sad factory be destroyed by any means necessary. And maybe, RO could forgive himself for failing to prevent Dressrosa from falling into the hands of the Don Quixote family. Is it settled then? Akainu crosses his arms. The whole organization has been in flux, because with Sengoku's sudden, though not unexpected, resignation, hardly anything's been done. Not that Sengoku had did anything. He had allowed the evil to sprout, and to bud and create the so-called Great Pirate Age, during his tenure. Sure, Akainu could see how Sengoku had tried to stem the flow, but he was too weak. His actions, while pragmatic, resulted in weaker enforcement against the scoundrels who ruled the seas. And his nominated successor, a man who skipped work, who allowed the devil child to roam everywhere, who let the Straw Hats go after destroying Eni's lobby and bringing the cipher pulled down to its knees. To let his marines in the hands of Aokiji was far beyond the line that Akainu was willing to cross. With him in charge, the marines would be a disciplined force that could take on a Yonko, and win, no questions asked. They would be able to gain greater controls over the seas, protecting those who needed the marines. Tradesmen, civilians, Those who were constantly at the mercies of the buccaneers would benefit from the increase in numbers once the conscription was in place. And furthermore, the Marines had been stagnating under Sengoku. Sengoku was too weak-willed, too willing to sacrifice large causes for small gains. A wise man had once wrote that, if an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared. By being too lenient on people like the Shichibukai crocodile, the civilians had suffered. But with added controls in place, the Shichibukai would have their actions monitored. No longer shall they behave like kings according to their liking. Aokiji would not have done so. Aokiji would have sat back and allowed the world to bounce back into another, pirate age. And Akainu would never allow that to happen. Not in his lifetime. When is our estimated time of arrival? He asked one of the petty officers currently serving on board the ship. 001 weeks time, sir. The petty officer stuttered back, rubbing his sweat away. Akainu turned his attention back onto the map of the New World. With Marine HQ being moved to the realm of the Four Emperors, there would be more enforcement in the uncharted waters than ever before. The power of the Emperors were concentrated there. Should the Marines move to the New World, there was a tactical advantage to be claimed, because they would no longer need to go through Mariajoy in order to get the New World. Furthermore, they would be able to choke the Four Emperors in their stronghold. Surround the enemy, and thus weaken the lifelines of alcohol and revenue that the Emperors could obtain from the Four Blues. Threaten the pirates who blackmailed and cut throats on their way to the top, and scare those who were tempted into piracy to never give it a second glance. The Marines would no longer be conflicted, like a ship without a rudder. They would have direction, and Akainu would be the one taking the lead in guiding the Marines onto higher ground. 1 week's time, they'll be there. Is that so? Marco narrows his eyes. So the guy who got Pops into this mess is there. Yes. Ace nods, breathing deeply as he leans back against the wall. It's a risk that they're taking. But they can't afford to lose any more time, because right now, Pop's life is in danger. But they've got additional help now. The Moby Dick would be left miles away from the shore, so Ace, Marco, Jozu and Vista, being the most identifiable, would be the second distraction. Haruta and Thatch and the other commanders would be the actual ones getting into the base. The rest would be in charge of taking care of whoever who moves too close to where the base and the attack force by extension are. Meanwhile, the ones taking on the most risk by being the main distraction are sailing right up to them. Ace's breath catches in his throat as a ship emerges from the lightning-intensive island just a few nautical miles off. Its sails are colorful and lively, and there is a cartoon masthead, similar to what he had seen before. But this time, the crew's grown bigger, and the ship has grown bigger along with it. There isn't the flag he's familiar with, but Ace thinks that he doesn't need it. Ship sailing port side. He hears someone from the crow nest, and the rest echo as the ship sails alongside the Moby Dick. It isn't as large as the flagship of the Whitebeard pirates. But there was a commotion on board the ship, and a few moments later, Ace could pick out a few figures that he could just about recognize. One of them takes a leap, dashing across with a flight time too long for it to have been a simple jump. He lands on the railing, standing astride. Permission to come aboard. Oh. Ace's heart freezes when he catches sight of Sanji's older self. Though it had only been less than a year since he had seen them in Alabasta, the cook didn't change much in appearance at all, apart from growing a goatee and having his forelocks over his left eyebrow instead of his right. He doesn't look old, which means his brother was so young when he became Pirate King. He was too young to have been executed. You. Thatch marches over, pointing a finger at him. So it's been you who's been possessing my food. You should be honored. Future Sanji raises a haughty brow. Your food was good enough to possess. Others weren't well prepared to become my vessel. He scoffed back. Hey. Ace hurriedly interrupts, because Thatch's expression is turning ugly, and it's a pointless way to strike up a conversation. So you're planning to act as our distraction? Thanks man. Yeah, Portgas. It's the least we can do, after all. Sanji flips his hand. Then, he slaps his fist against his palm. Oi, get your asses over here. We've got something to say to him. Ace knew he had been on that ship, but his memories were blurry about the whole incident, up until he had leapt off the ship to rescue his brother at Marineford. It was as though someone had taken a pair of scissors and disconnected his memories of the situation he had found himself in, because he knows what he remembers of them didn't seem to tally up somehow. One by one, they arrive. First a gust of wind echoes the arrival of the swordsman. Then, the sea waves rush up, forming a female figure that becomes more solid with each passing second. She clutches a staff, but it's been strapped to her hips in segments. She points one of the segments on the deck of the ship, and a fog appears, before growing more and more denser until it forms a familiar elephine figure. Finally, something steps out of the shadow of Jozu's bulk, lining up against his crewmates, but the outline of him is hazy and unclear as though he doesn't seem to be on the same plane of existence as Ace. The five that had stood beside Luffy at Alabasta looked at one another, exchanging unspoken words. Then, as one, they bowed. Thanks for looking after our troublesome captain. They're echoing his words. They're copying what he said. Ace laughs, because this is brilliant. His brothers achieved his dream of being a pirate king. And his crew was with him all the way. Then the smile falls off Ace's face, because this confirms, beyond all suspicions, that his brother was a weakened, shadowed copy of himself by the time he joins their ship from whatever future he had been. The green-haired swordsman disappears, and reappears right next to Ace. He wears a serious expression on his face, but it isn't filled with irritation at being awake and not drunk, but morose with frustration and sorrow. I'm sorry that we couldn't look after him up until the end. We couldn't keep that promise. Ace sighs as future Zoro leans back, waiting for his admonitions. As if you could keep him from doing whatever he wanted anyway. Because Luffy had been headstrong since 7, and stubborn to boot. Well, what happened to your flag? Well, Nami waves at the ship. They don't have the Straw Hat Jolly Roger, but instead one that seems ordinary with a lion's mane, with no hint as to who they sail under at all. What were they playing at? We aren't quite the Straw Hat crew anymore. His expression must be clear to them if Nami feels the need to whisper to him. We're using this one for the moment until we decide what we are going to fly. But we won't put another flag. Lu Goku would be the only captain we will ever have. Zoro interjects. So don't think that we'll fly Whitebeard's flag. Ever. Wasn't counting on it. Thatch looks annoyed at being left out of this conversation. Sensing this, Sanji motions, calling down the rest of the known crew while Nami returns back to their own ship to continue steering. First the Devil Child, Nico Robin, then Cyborg, Frankie, and then comes someone that was weird even by Ace's New World-shaped standards. Good afternoon, gentlemen. A skeleton. Seriously, his brother picked out the weird ones all right. Was this the ship that our captain sailed upon? He whistles in appreciation. It's a good ship. So you're the king's crew, then. Marco steps out of his cabin for what seemed like the first time in days. There are deeper bags under his eyes, making them look more sleepy than usual. Ace tries to help of course, but Marco is keeping what he's doing close to his chest. Yeah, you've met our cook already, but we've only known Ace. You ruined our plans to rescue Ace, then. Curiel says in a deceptively serious tone. Well, we could say that you ruined ours as well. Nico Robin cannily replies, and Curiel barks back a laugh. Ace can tell that Curiel likes them already. Sanji doesn't make a pass at his ship's sisters. Ace would have knocked him off the ship for that, but is intently discussing how much their captain had eaten while on board their ship. Zoro, whose wanted posters failed to suggest the eagle-eyed gaze as he surveyed the crew for possible dangers. Nami, the sweet-looking redhead whose scrappiness gives absolutely no quarter, wears a worried expression as she mounts the wheel, casting her eyes out towards the sea. Tiny Chopper rushing into the infirmary in order to see Whitebeard for himself, hardly minding the fact that he's a reindeer, let alone a stranger on board their ship after introducing himself to the crew along the way. The Chopper Ace had known would have been too embarrassed to ask for pointers from the nurses within. Usopp, who's retreated back to the shadows, telling tall tales to an enraptured audience while keeping an eye out for their ship. Very loud, overly expressive Frankie, who alternates between discussing ship construction-related matters with the shipwrights on board and demonstrating the effectiveness of a suplex with extendable arms. And of course, Dead Bones, Brook, formerly Humming Swordsman, Brook, also formerly dead, who Ace had remembered as the first one who greeted him after his escape. Going to deliver Bink's sake. Following the sea, and had been enough to convince Ace that Impel Down was no longer in sight. A walking, talking, belching and farting skeleton. Ace still can't get over that. How much time are we going to take? Dusty asks as he successfully extricates himself from the storytelling. 1 week. Ace replies, smirking as he crosses his arms. The Straw Hat Pirates and Whitebeard Pirates would get along just fine. 1 week until we reach. Chapter 20, IMPTAN and Snipe. Hey, do you know this story about a snipe, a clam and a fisherman? Ooh, a story. Tell me. Okay. A clam was sitting out in the sun when suddenly a snipe flew down to peck at the clam. What's a snipe? It's a bird that's really hard to catch. Anyway, let me continue on with the story. Suddenly the clam slammed the shell shut, gripping the snipe's beak in between. The snipe said, if it doesn't rain today, and it doesn't rain tomorrow, I shall see a dead clam on the beach. The clam said, if I don't open today, and I don't open up tomorrow, I shall see a dead snipe on the beach. While they were still grappling with each other, a fisherman passed by and netted them both. That's short. Boring. What you don't get is why the fisherman was able to take the two. If the two hadn't fought, then the fisherman would be unable to get them away. In other words, nobody wins unless you work together. His condition is deteriorating. Marco slowly lowered his head into his hands as he pored over the medical reports from the infirmary. Damn. Thrice damned. Marco knew it then, but he was sure of it now. He wasn't fit to be captain. He simply couldn't. Marco could support others. He was even able to lead men into battle, to retreat the last in order to protect his ship brothers. But Marco just wasn't captain material. He was scared that without Pops, he would be the one to lead them to ruin, to be destroyed by the others gunning for Whitebeard's emperor position, used as a stepping stone for all of the other pirates. The Whitebeard pirates were at heart a crew revolving around a captain, and should that centerpiece disappear, Marco knew in his heart that he couldn't replace Whitebeard. None of them could, but the thought of being the one responsible for breaking the group, for dispersing them. Marco couldn't be the one to do so. Because they were his brothers. Yet if Pops were to die, Marco couldn't form the cornerstone of the Whitebeard Pirates. The position of temporary captain did not rest easy on him. Each day felt like a struggle, as Ace and the others looked to him for orders. His brothers were relying on him. Then the Pirate King's crew had given them their heading, and now they were 2 days away from a marine base. Every instinct in Marco was screaming at him, telling him to get away, that it's not worth leading the Whitebeard Pirates into a death trap. But the bastard who had cursed Pops into a never-ending sleep, anger swept over his face as he recalled how despondent his ship's sisters had looked when they related how Pop's body was breaking down from the stress that a combination of nightmares and some unknown concoction had given him. This upcoming battle was an outlet for them all, and Marco knew that this was only a distraction from their original goal. But he needed something to ground himself. And if it was hope that Pops could get better, then why not? It could be false. It could even be that he was being overly optimistic. Marco was too afraid to be the new captain. 3 days to Punk Hazard. He took a glance at the logbook, opened up to one of their earlier journeys, when their crew was still small, and all of them were hale and hearty. Marco, bring some booze. Hell no, you're still recovering from that battle. Marco had shouted back, frustrated at the obstinacy of his new captain. Doctor's orders, 3 weeks. Captain's orders override doctors. And before Marco could stop him, Edward Newgate had taken a casket and opened it, sharing it between him, Jozu, Thatch, Vista and Blamenco. Marco had sighed, before taking part in sharing their ill-gotten goods. Marco smirked at the reminder. The doctor in question had whacked him in the face after sniffing him. And Vista had made things worse by causing flowers to scatter and making Jozu sneeze, throwing himself through a wall. Blamenco, high on the 30 mugs that would have caused an ordinary man to be poisoned by alcohol, had proceeded to wreck things even further by taking out his trusty mallet and attempting to whack the doctor in the face, only to hit Thatch instead. In the end, all of them had to make a run for it as the bartender, wielding a Molotov cocktail and a large amount of gunpowder, proceeded to explode. Literally. Fun days. Marco somehow missed them. Oh, he did love the fact that their family had grown larger without increasing the distance between each member. And that they had become an infamous crew in the Grand Line, enough to be considered a threat to the world government. But at the same time, had they painted a huge target on themselves by becoming so notorious? Can it, Marco? You're overthinking it here. With that, Marco sighed, flipping back to the logbook where he was keeping track of where they were. He shouldn't keep his mind on depressing topics like that. He had work to do. Well, here we are. Mary spoke out as she turned towards the deserted isle. While it didn't have the half-frozen, half-molten landscape that her captain had spoken of, it was still desolated, with negligible amounts of vegetation and ruins of the old fishing village that had once existed. I must be insane for agreeing to this. Trafalgar Law muttered, even as he called for his crew to prepare to sail away. Cora-san. Thanks, Law. R.O. embraced his kid. We will make it back. Promise. If you don't come back, this island won't even be left on the seas. Law lost his smirk. You better keep your promise. Mary, I'll be within a few hours sailing distance, but avoid the areas where the damn admirals are present. Why is the SDF base here anyway? It's an abandoned marine base which is unloggable. Mary returned in a deadpan voice. I'm not surprised, seeing that the Self-Defense Force is an unlicensed vigilante group with a name for raiding slave ships. Yeah, whatever. Law waved his hand in a dismissive gesture. Guess I'll get going. But he was still entwined in Rose's hug. Mary groaned, as Law tried to peel himself away and only managed to succeed in causing R.O. to tighten his grasp. Cora-san, let go. Not until you promise me not to attack the Marines here. Cora-san. Law. Oh fine. Law huffed. I won't go after the Marines. R.O. let go of him, and Law gave a momentary soft smile. See you, Cora-san, Mary. Hope you don't get caught. He walked back onto his ship, leaving the two on shore. Mary stared off into the distance, remembering another retreating figure who had been a bit taller, dressed in different clothes, and was willing to do anything for his precious people. After all these years, he's still the same. Quote. He's a good kid, Mary muttered under her breath. I know, but he'll do anything for you. I know. R.O. shook his head. He's still going after Daffy, you know. Says that since I can't pull the trigger, he'll be the one to do it. Can you? Mary replied, glancing Law's retreating ship. Can you kill your brother? R.O. didn't reply at first, only opening and closing his palms in a strange manner. Quote. I don't know. Rose's voice was hesitant. He's right when he said that I resembled our poor father. Back on Minion Island, I couldn't shoot him even at the risk of dying myself. You probably won't be able to escape had you done so. Mary wrapped an arm around him. If I recall correctly, his men were there along with him. They would never have left you alive if they had seen their young master being shot. Mary couldn't understand it. Sure, Rose's bastard brother had a great deal of charisma. However, even as she was a couple of meters away, RO could practically see, narcissistic megalomaniac, written all over the overbearing bastard that was wrapped in human flesh. Even if he did call himself human, there was no empathy in him. He didn't care for his subordinates the way her captain had. Right, even if RO was more vocal now, he tended to lapse into silence whenever he was reminded of his brother. Or anything that reminded him of that incident 11 years ago. Not much of a shock, if you think about it. Mary obliged, filling the silence by talking about the island. This whole area used to be full of vegetation. 2 years ago, there was a gigantic explosion caused by one of Dr. Vegapunk's scientists. While they managed to evacuate the researchers and soldiers here, the prisoners who served as test subjects were left behind. Punk Hazard was thus closed off. The scientist in question, a gas logia named Caesar Clown, had been imprisoned for building the gas weapon which had caused the explosion in the first place. However, 1 year back, Caesar had escaped and returned here, supposedly purifying the gas on this island. However, the poisonous gas was instead combined with a zone devil fruit and locked somewhere on this island. He then recruited some of the surviving prisoners on this island, and assisted in giving them artificial limbs. In return, he has a loyal crew willing to serve him. The ones that were going after would be the kids on this island. Caesar took some kids to this island, claiming that they had a disease that he's going to cure. In actual fact, he's experimenting on them, trying to make them into giants for the military. Sengoku would never agree to that. RO hissed out. Exactly. But he thinks Akainu shares the same mentality. At the same time, those kids would never lead normal lives even if the experiment turned out successful. Ah, there they are. Two figures had caught up to them, and were dressed in the standard self-defense force attire of a white jacket coat and a dark uniform under it. Mary grimaced as she stared at the two which had come to greet her. Of course these were the two that Jacob had picked out. RO, this is Kitsune, she pointed to the broad-chested, cross-armed figure on the left, and sniper of the self-defense force. Kitsune, sniper, this is my employee RO. Pleasure. Kitsune took a huff of cigar smoke. RO winced, stepping further away from him. Nice to meet you. Sniper, who appeared to be a dark-haired swordswoman, smiled as she shook Ro's hand. You've brought him up to task. Thanks. It's good to see you. Mary answered, glaring at the cigar smoker. It's bad for your lungs, don't you know that? Not as if I have anything to worry about. Kitsune replied. That, surgeon of death. Where is he? He's a few hours off from here. RO answered, staring back at Kitsune with a slight bit of intimidated awe. He says that he's not landing on an island where two marine admirals are having a pissing contest. Is that so? Sniper pushed back her rectangular glasses, frowned in thought. That's an annoyance. We hope that you could enlist his help as well. Not to worry. Mary replied, pasting a courteous smile on her face. I'm a trained doctor as well, you know. Not to mention that she had taught law. So you are. HMPH. Kitsune snorted a smoky breath. We have close to 50 men under our charge. Mary, you're in charge of actually treating the children and thus put on standby. Sniper and I would be targeting the possible assailants. Possible assailants? What do you mean? Mary asked. She had thought that there were only Caesar's soldiers, the marine admirals, who would be more focused on aforementioned pissing contest, and Caesar himself to worry about. The Whitebeard pirates would also be attacking Akainu in revenge for Newgate's death. Sniper replied. It seems as though some of their crew would be arriving here as well for the invading force. Quote, Whitebeard crew. Mary froze. Jacob didn't tell any of that to me. Whitebeard crew, the one that her captain had been on. Her captain had died, and last she heard, the Pirate King's crew had taken her captain from Marineford. Which meant that they were there when her captain had died, and his last known whereabouts. Judging by the camaraderie between the Whitebeard pirate remnants in her time and the Pirate King's crew. That cunning and manipulative bastard. Kitsune, sniper. Mary felt her mouth tightening as her teeth clenched. I believe that you weren't aware of some pertinent details. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Cursed by Jennifer Wilson. Chapter 21. Summary. Is it time travel chaos? Due to the world falling into chaos, with the Pirate King's crew we all know and love, Luffy and a group of 20 go back in time in order to change their past. However, being complete neophytes at this time travel thing, they've gone back 50 years too early. 50 years after this incident, and several years before they took the trip back in time, Luffy reappears, this time on board the Moby Dick. Hiding his name, he stays aboard the ship for a few months, and ends changing things. Saving Thatch for one, and restoring one of his guardian's memory whilst en route to Marineford for another. It looks like his original crew's back. The Pirate King's crew comes back in time as well, and they're a bit confused about the whole matter. Namely their captain having a guilt complex the size of Reverse Mountain for one, and moping on board for another. As their swordsman puts it, that doesn't sound like their captain at all. Marineford. Tut tut tut. It becomes more chaotic than it originally is. Luffy, or Goku as they know him, warns them in advance as to how they had prepared the battle in this time. The Whitebeard pirates go into battle thinking they've got this situation handled. But as they arrive, the main participant of this battle, one Portgas D. Ace isn't here. Where is that hot-blooded no-good brat? Meanwhile, another group appears. It's this time Luffy to the rescue. Or perhaps not, because an outlying ship discovers their whereabouts. Lucky for them, it's the Revolutionary Army, and furthermore, Luffy's long-lost brother Sabo returns to the ship. But what's this? Sabo doesn't know Luffy. No matter, Luffy can fix the problem by pulling out a bounty poster. Great job, Luffy, way to make a brother worried. Sabo faints, and another outlying ship comes across them. But what's this? It's an enemy. The Marines capture the ship, and while the other prisoners flee, Luffy and the members of the Revolutionary Army on board get captured. Hooray for the Marines. They've got another famous prisoner to execute. Though it isn't the one they were looking for, no matter, because Straw Hat had declared war on the world government and burnt their flag. Good for them. Or not. Just in the nick of time, the star of the show reappears. Ace comes barging in, rescuing his stupid little crybaby brother, as he puts it, and destroys the execution platform. Home free. Luffy is still a person who can't read the atmosphere, and unexpectedly falls asleep. Boo. Admiral Akainu dashes along to kill the two no-good brats, but another no-good brat reappears. Yes, it's Sabo, with full possession of the memory. The ASL brothers have reunited. Go home boys, nothing to see here. And Akainu turns his attention to public enemy number 1, aka Edward Newgate himself. Boy, isn't our hothead Fire Fist pissed off now. And time for our troll. Blackbeard, fresh with convicts from level 6 arrives at Marineford. He's a bit confused as to Ace's continued survival, but no worries, he's got this situation handled. He turns to Ace, ready for round 2 of their battle. However, let's not forget the time-traveling Pirate King himself. Future Luffy lands a blow on him, because like hell he's going to let this happen again. Hey wait a second, Admiral Kizaru's just about snuck on him. Luckily, Luffy has learnt something over the years and swats the light user to the black hole. Take that, physics. Oi. Whitebeard is struck clean through by Akainu, who's definitely not involved in the ongoing melee there. Whitebeard tells him that no, he's going to die on Marineford. To future Luffy, that's not going to happen. He knocks Whitebeard out with a single blast, and protects their retreat. Some members of the Warlords help out as well, most notably Hancock and Jinbei. And here comes the Pirate King's crew. Luffy once again proves his straightforward attitude, by asking if future people poop. Luffy, please observe the situation. You are being protected by him. You do not ask the poor swordsman if he defecates. Kobe calls a halt to this battle, but the fun's just starting. Kobe. Akainu attacks the boy, but another stops him. It's red-haired Shanks, here to save the day. The Pirate King's crew once again sows havoc and creates chaos. With the song, We Go, playing in the background, the crossfire between our Moss Head and perverted cook causes most of those who hasn't already fallen to Ace's earlier conqueror's hockey in the background. Future Sanji's fiery passion ignites, only the actions of a level-headed Nami causes him to fly into a crowd of Marines. Strike. Akainu tries to go for another round, but what's this? A turn back. The King of Snipers seizes the opportunity and strikes him while he's down. Go Usopp. Anyway, future Luffy's rescued, the Whitebeard pirates are long gone, and it's time for a party. Hooray Straw Hat. Future Luffy awakens on board the ship. His anxious but delighted crew members greet him, and he retells his own story. Looks like the Marines went after the Isle of Women, and Fishmen Island, and Alabasta and Drum Kingdom together. That was what had led him to craft a path through time in which he and his new companions went through. Turns out, what Luffy means by destroying his island meant eating everything that was in sight. Typical Roger. Typical Luffy as well. The Straw Hats grin good-naturedly, because their captain is still the same old person after all. But what's this? Their captain can't eat anything. How come? Why? The captain throws the gloves he's been wearing this whole time onto the deck as someone arrives. Future Luffy tries to allay their worries with a smile, but unexpectedly bursts into water. On board the Moby Dick, the Whitebeard pirates stare. And stare, because their 2nd Division commander's self-proclaimed brother is devouring food at an unprecedented rate. In the meantime, Ace is arguing with Sabo about who rescues who. All 3 of their dads suck by the way. But that momentary peace shatters as the Blackbeard pirates sail towards them, intent on finishing the job that Marineford had done on them. Future Luffy reappears once more, this time to protect the family that's so close to his heart now. He's working on a time limit however, so he's got to finish this fast. He takes out most of Blackbeard's original crew, but is caught from behind by Shiryu of the Rain. Blackbeard manages to entrap him within the powers of his devil fruit, and Luffy reflects on what relationships he had made, both in his past and after his time trip. Being alone was more painful than being hurt. But Luffy wasn't alone in the end. And he smiles as he draws his last breath. Ace's heart is filled with regret, but at the same time he realizes how much value his life had. He was born on this world for a purpose after all. That fills him with hope. He exchanges Sakazuki once more with his brothers as Marco looks on. The trio are visited by Dark King Rayleigh, who swims from Sabayati and reaches the Whitebeard pirates. What a tough guy indeed. They decide to make their way back towards Marineford, in order to give the message to Luffy's crew. While dining and dashing, and ringing the ox bell, Garp catches them. The trio frantically screeched. Ace would later go on to say that he had not done so. So had Sabo. Luffy was quite happy to acknowledge the fact that he had panicked upon seeing his grandfather, and who would not have done so. Marco comes to a realization that the Whitebeard pirates have to grow stronger, because Marineford, Blackbeard and Goku has shown that their world would become stronger than ever. A curious message has appeared, and Raftel reappears on maps once more. But there isn't any such island. The big news of Ace's parentage is overshadowed by the ripples that the death announcement of future Luffy, not that they know that Goku is from the future, of course. Or is it? In the meantime, Shirahoshi's come to a decision. She isn't the scaredy cat of a mermaid princess after all this time. She has work to do. And she's going to train harder and harder, so that she would be able to protect her beloved Luffy-sama once more. You go girl. She makes her debut into society, but what's this? That bastard captain of the Flying Dutchman, Vanderdecken X, is here. Luckily, future Luffy's removed his mark, so the axe he throws after being rejected by her misses her completely. While in shock, he's arrested. Hooray for Shirahoshi. We now turn our eyes towards Sabayati Archipelago. There's a quaint little bar run by the proprietor, Mary, and her employee, R.O., someone we all know but I'm not telling. Garp had destroyed Mary's bar a few years earlier, but Mary's got a soft spot for the old man alright, so that's okay. Come after hours instead, Garp. So Garp decides to take his friend out after the utter disaster that is Ace and Luffy's botched execution, not that he minds it much anyway, and Sengoku comes out of it a lot happier when he entered. Enough not to scold Garp for 2 hours when he finds out how the three miscreants had created havoc in Marineford with Garp, unable to stop them. But what's this? It turns out that Bartholomew Kuma isn't brain dead after all. Why? He doesn't know, and he's not going to leak out the locations of his comrades to them, but at the same time there's no way Vegapunk's able to cover for him. So he turns to Mary, who he's met before and is popular enough with the Marines not to arouse suspicion. But Jacob of the Self-Defense Force, part-time writer and general busybody, happens to be there as well. He tries to lure Mary to the dark side, aka the Self-Defense Force, but Mary tells him no. Jacob is still of the belief that Kuma's a pacifista, but both he and Kuma himself learns that it was not the case, because of Mary's interference. Kuma receives an elucidation, and you came to see that Mary's one of the 20 companions as well. Hancock fetches her boyfriend and the old geezer, and Ace tries to reconcile the fact that the arrogant and rude warlord happens to be Luffy's lover. Which Luffy hasn't denied, but is painfully oblivious to the attention that Hancock's paying him. Boy, would this be a mess later on. As Luffy leaves, Ace is reminded of future Luffy once more, but someone else on board realizes this same fact for the first time. I wonder who is it? Future Zoro's trying to interrogate Shirahoshi, because not only is she powerful, she's the most likely of what he knows to be their ally to survive as well. In the end, he lets go of the Luffy plush toy and Shirahoshi lets slip the fact that the 20 companions are going to stick to 20 separate captains, none of which are Luffy. Zoro, satisfied with this investigation, leaves. Garp returns from celebrating his grandson's continued survival on Dawn Island, and stops by at Arabasta for food, because he's managed to eat all of their supplies. While Helmeppo tries to pick up a girl and is forced to share later on that he was slapped on the face for his poor pickup lines, Kobe tries to flirt with a girl by telling her stories of Luffy. Who knew that the girl happened to be the princess of Alabasta, right? Kobe learns the truth of Alabasta, and decides to seek out Garp for extra training. Kobe. That is remarkably foolish. I applaud you for your daring, but Garp had punched out 8 mountains for training. And you want to ask him for extra training? Here comes a tale of someone receiving training as well. Luffy, tired out from practicing Conqueror's hockey against giant oversized animals' dreams, and future Robin reveals that the time stream is going astray, and what seemed like complicated events in their past is being warped further and further by their actions. Uh-oh, Goku, you've got some explaining to do. Or not, it looks like something is pushing things back to their original position. Luffy wakes up, and gets chased all over the island as he is reminded by the various landmarks on what his crewmates would have done if they were in his situation. It's nice to think of who you're fighting for. Thatch is preparing some food. The last time round, his ramen had came alive. This time, it's egg noodles. Egg noodles and dumplings and braised meat, and head. An animated head sticking out of the noodles. Oh come on, Thatch thinks to himself, bristling. The last time round, Marco had thrown the bowl of noodles down the toilet. There's no way he's wasting this batch of noodles now. And with Marco's help, he threatens the god of food into remaining long enough such that he could carry it to the infirmary where the rest of the commanders have gathered, and they interrogate the bowl of noodles. It's revealed that all of the 20 possess some kind of unique power. However, other than the Pirate King's crew, there are 2 other players at work, and they're trying to choose the candidates by limiting the access that any pirate could have towards the companions. Now that's what I call cheating. The self-defense force is making headway by having some already on their side, but the Revolutionary Army's not far behind by managing to isolate two. Wait, not in the story yet, not supposed to tell the reader yet. Keep this a secret between us, won't you, dearest readers? The god of food, aka the Pirate King's cook, learns of his captain's recent whereabouts. Viva mermaids. But no, it looks like the swordsman's ahead of him, and he vanishes in between the depths of the noodles while holding an invisible argument with said swordsman. Thatch thinks that they've got more questions than answers now. Back in the bar, Aro finds out that he's got a new colleague, and he isn't exactly happy with the news. But he tries to engage the guy in conversation, because it's really awkward even when you don't like talking. Along the way, he gently tears Kuma out of his shell, and causes the backroom wall to be accidentally destroyed. Whoops. Somewhere in the new world, Crocodile finds out that his powers aren't working at all. Seriously, it's like someone's interfering with his powers. Enough for his right hand to reform itself after years of stubbornly refusing to. Drums roll please. It's Miss Wednesday, the princess of Arabasta, who's swearing that there's no way that she'll ever nominate him to be her king, and she'll block any attempts at mass slaughter, thieving and raping, the usual pirate spiel. In pure spite, she swaps his hand back, but Crocodile didn't head Baroque works just because of his powers alone. He figures out that even as his devil fruit was turns him into a sandman, that's not all his powers are restricted to, and successfully turns his hand back. Miss Wednesday reluctantly tells him about what had happened to the world at large. It looks like someone is plotting again. Jacob reveals himself to Newgate, and has trapped him within a nightmare. Screw the fleet admiral, because causing a man be trapped in a place where he's alone, especially one who values his family like Whitebeard, that's ultimate jerkface right there. Control freak. Asshole. Fortunately, the Whitebeard pirates have got a way of contacting the Straw Hat pirates, because Jacob has left them a note. How convenient. Future Sanji, due to long hours spent in the kitchen, has a more sensitive nose when it comes to processed goods, and thus can make out who had caused this. The Pirate King's crew hold a discussion on board their ship, and it looks that the base's punk hazard people. Would you look at that? 1.5 years in advance. It's a typical busy Friday night, and Rose triggered, but that's okay, because Mary's there. However, a new problem has arose. Asshole Jacob strikes once more, this time threatening to make the children on Punk Hazard sicker than they really are. Mary really doesn't want to do this, but she doesn't think that she's got a choice, because both a bartender and a doctor have one thing in common other than privacy: they're people who care for those that they serve. RO knows one doctor that would be happy to help them, however. It's been half a year since Marineford, and the Marines have been stagnating. Akainu is pissed off, because frankly, he knows that Sengoku's too weak. As Machiavelli once puts it, strike your opponents with overwhelming force, and what Sengoku did was to let some go, and persecute others lightly. The Marines aren't a viable threat, but Akainu would change that, because once he becomes the fleet admiral, he's going to choke the livelihood of the New World pirates, starting with the 4 emperors. But first, he's got a showdown with his other admiral, Aokiji. At Punk Hazard. Because sharing is caring and all of that, the Pirate King's crew agreed to join forces with the Whitebeard pirates. While the Pirate King's crew and the more well-known members of the Whitebeard pirates such as Marco, Ace, Jozu and Vista would be distracting the 2 fighting admirals, Haruta, Thatch and future Sanji would be heading towards the abandoned base where the self-defense force is suspected to be held at. Marco knows that they're walking into a trap, but anything's better than facing the fact that he might be the next captain. He doesn't want to, but he feels pressured to do so. Mary and RO have arrived on Punk Hazard, hitchhiking with the Heart Pirates. The Surgeon of Death is shown to be extremely protective of his guardian, so RO makes him promise that he won't destroy the island. They hug, before Law tells him that he's going to wait offshore, because no way is he sticking around even to watch a pissing contest between 2 admirals. The 2 meet the dynamic duo of Kitsune, a broad-chested chain smoker, and Sniper, a dark-haired swordswoman with glasses. I guess you all know who those 2 are. I mean, it's painfully obvious that no battle on Punk Hazard's going to leave the 2 of them out, right? Mary puts the pieces together and comes to a realization that Jacob's been playing them all for a fool. Setting the Whitebeard pirates up against them, it's evident that either the Whitebeard pirates and the Pirate King's crew are beaten to a men, which is highly unlikely, or she, RO, Kitsune and Sniper are killed. Taking down at least one guardian of Raftel, and thus preventing another Pirate King from being found. Mary could applaud that if she wasn't the one who Jacob tried to kill. Who am I? That's an interesting question. Breaking the 4th wall hasn't been one of my talents, but it's better to start later than never after all. And I won't be appearing here just yet, because the Revolutionary Army hasn't gathered all of its members right now, and unlike the 20 Guardians, the Pirate King's crew, or the Self-Defense Force, were a bit less showy. Luffy's my amigo, capiche? And it would really make us all sad if such a valuable soul were to be wasted due to the actions of the 2 other powers. If they're changing things so much, then what's the point of going to the past then? It's better to keep things straight right up until a pivotal event before changing stuff around. One thing's for sure though. Luffy and I would have the last laugh in the end. Because that's the way the Pirate King rolls.